Hello and welcome to the AAPEX webinar series. My name is Kelly Denman and I'm with AAPEX Event Management. The webinar series will host one webinar per month leading up to our in-person event in Las Vegas, Nevada. AAPEX 2024 is going to be taking place on Tuesday, November 5th through Thursday, November 7th, 2024. In preparation for the event, be sure to visit apexshow.com for all event details. As a friendly reminder, mics will be muted for the duration of this webinar, but we will have a Q&A portion at the end. So please submit any questions you may have throughout the chat function. This webinar will also be recorded and available at apexshow.com later this week. Today's webinar is the next generation of aftermarket employees, and it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Kathleen Long, Chief Revenue Officer at RepairPal.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I am really excited to be here. I will say I'm very excited about this topic and what we might create as an automotive aftermarket. So let's think a little bit about how we think about complexity or how we manage it before we dive into the what it is there is for us to do here. And so a lot of times I spend a lot of time coaching folks and I'm always telling them to get bigger, right? Think bigger, be bigger. In this case, I'm going to give the opposite advice of get smaller. And so we move from this big sky, big picture landscape to actually one of my neighbor's front yard gardens here in Denver, Colorado. Let's think about that. Let's think about how we localize our opportunities. So with diversity, equity, inclusion, we're including people, we're making sure that they have a seat at the table. But then when we move into the idea of belonging, it's one step beyond inclusion. That's where we're saying people are not only included in the important conversations they should be included in based on their role, based on who they are at the company, but they also have a sense that they're here to work on something and that they're part of a community that they belong to. And then access, which is something we may or may not be thinking about also as a business. That's where we make sure that the work that we're doing is accessible to a variety of different employees. And then we think about employees of differing abilities or who may have what we typically call a disability or a need for accommodation, that there is access in our business for those employees. So however we think about it, the bottom line is that part of how we need to think about managing our staff in the future is around these concepts. Even if you, unlike me, are not a fan of alphabet soup, we still need to think about our employees as a community and how we manage these employees, both individually and in groups, what trends are happening in our business, what cultures are there, and whether those ultimately serve the business or not. It can be more work to manage employees in these ways. And so again, acknowledging that, but the results are going to be that our businesses are better future-proof, they're better positioned for growth and development, and hopefully, ultimately, they are a better reflection of our community. And so when we think about creating a good job, like what is a good job? Outside of being able to do the things that we love, a good job is one where you feel seen for being the best version of yourself. You sense that your colleagues have your back. You don't feel discriminated against based on gender, race, sexual orientation. You feel your position secure, and you have confidence that you're going to get the help you need to navigate changes in the working world. And that is according to Harvard Business Review. So we know Harvard says and does smart things. And so, how does this apply to your business? Are you feeling like you've created this environment for your employees? Are they able to be seen as the best version of themselves? Do their colleagues have their back? Do they feel discriminated against or not? And do they have some security around their position? And actually, interestingly, that's one of the differences we're seeing in Gen Z versus millennials. Is that Gen Z really is looking for that sense of security. And when we think about what these generations and why generations matter, right? Why are, millennials different than Gen Z? Why are they different than Gen X? What would cause these differences? And there are cultures around the differences. but many of them are caused by what those generations had to go through. So specifically, we're dealing with a generation that may have experienced going through school during a pandemic, something that's very different for me. We all went through it. But what stage of life were we in when we went through it, and what did it mean to our lives to have gone through that? And so having just exited what for many people was a very tumultuous and uncertain time, younger generations are looking for that security. So are you doing a good job providing it? All good questions, right? And of course, we always feel like we're doing our best on a day-to-day basis. But what we know is that if we're not doing a good job ultimately, or our employees believe we're not doing a good job, that they're going to leave. And typically they don't leave the job itself. They're leaving a manager and what they perceive to be a toxic culture. So there's solutions to all of these problems, and the solutions are ones that require us to really dig in. But we can fix over 85% of employee issues by understanding current workplace sentiment and employee needs. And then once we have that understanding, making sure that we're addressing culture management workplace issues, that we've allowed employees growth opportunities and the ability to use their critical thinking skills, and that we've given them the proper tools. So in some aftermarket jobs, particularly those in shops, we expect employees to come with their own tools. So as we think about that, it's one of the only industries where somebody can be an employee as opposed to an independent contractor and still be expected to bring their own tools. So how are we supplementing or helping with that issue? How are we making it easy for people to get into the industry, to stay there, and to be successful there? And then, thinking about restructuring if we need to. Is the way that we're paying our employees tied in with the critical metrics that we're measuring? Does it make sense to them? Are they able to maximize their compensation? Do they understand how to do that? And then what do they have with you? And hopefully part of that answer is a really great onboarding and career path program, even for small businesses, which we are one as well. It's especially important to make sure that people at least feel like, even if there's not a bunch of career levels for them to achieve because the business is small, that there's at least a way that they come into the business, that they're onboarded, and that they can grow and develop their skills. So let's talk a little bit more about some of these ideas. How do you understand how you're doing for your employees? Well, one really easy way is a stay interview. So most everybody has heard in the past about an exit interview. So we're all pretty familiar with that concept. But it's better to get in front of your employees and to have the conversations before they're ready to leave the business. And so one good thing to do is a stay interview. You can conduct these as a one-on-one conversation. You can conduct these as, an online quick, Google poll or survey that you send out, or you can use a different tool, obviously, but that's an easy one that many of us have access to. And so our HR department here sends out regular pulse checks every month or every other month to our employees just to kind of see where things are headed. You don't have to ask all of these questions in one fell swoop. You can certainly ask them, some questions one month, some questions another month, and think about questions that are relevant specifically to your environment or your business, but some good questions to ask. What do you look forward to when you come to work each day? What do you like most about working here? What do you like least about working here? What keeps you here? Why are you still here? If you could change something, what would it be? What would make your job more satisfying? Some additional questions that are good. If you've never done these before, you might want to stick with the basic questions like the ones that I just shared. But over time, you also want to get at some of these other things that are important for you to know as a business leader, how your employees like to be recognized. What talents do they have that they feel they're not using that they would like to offer to your business? What do they really want to learn? How are they motivated or demotivated? How you can best support them, how they feel about you as a manager or leader, or if you're not their direct manager or leader, good questions to ask about their intermittent or their intermediate leader, right? Like what could they do better? And then, ultimately, what might tempt them to leave? That's good for you to know. There may or may not be actionable items for you from all of this. Like if employees feel like their pay should double, that just may not be possible for you, and that's okay. But you really want to make sure that you understand what your risks are and where your employees are. And of course, in order to get honest feedback, you have to create a culture of safety in the first place so that people feel like you're listening, you're going to take their input, and you're not going to overreact to it. If you haven't really worked hard to create what your employees perceive to be as a culture of safety, then something you might want to do in the interim is make these anonymous. So again, if you use a third-party polling tool like Google Polls or something like that, it's pretty easy to do. You can turn on the anonymity and just make these multiple choice or not too much of a free-form answer so that people feel pretty comfortable answering it. And once you have a proven track record of taking this input, doing things about it, improving the environment, you can move into a space where this is more personalized and you get to understand the differences between, Joe and Joanne, right? And what they're looking for specifically as individuals. But first things first, you can address things in a more holistic or group-oriented way. And then just to show you that I am also living these values, I'm doing a check-in. So you can construct these as stay interviews or pulse checks, or you can just do check-ins. So I have optional check-ins I try to do with people who don't report directly to me, but are still in my group. And these are my questions for my upcoming check-in, and I ask different ones at different times. But I want to know my particular point of view right now. I'm really interested in understanding whether people have work they feel is meaningful. Because when we have work that's piling up on our plates, which we're all, overly busy, right? Like that's the condition of modern life. We want to feel that what we're doing matters. And then a lot of work doesn't feel so heavy. A lot of work feels heavy when a lot of what we do is disconnected either from who we are as a person or from what we think is important or meaningful. And then I also want to get at, what are people doing by rote or routine? They think it doesn't matter, but they're doing it anyway. Always want to know what could be improved, whether that's something I'm doing, something their direct leader is doing, or something the company at large could be doing differently. And I'd love to seek their advice. I always learn from people in these conversations, and it benefits me, hopefully, just as much as it benefits them. We are a remote company, so one thing that gets more challenging when you're a remote company is maintaining the status of connectivity, because this is how we're doing it. And just like, some of the issues we had in the beginning of this conversation where I was cutting in and out a little bit, there are technical difficulties in the connections that we're making to the community. And so I want to understand how that feels for folks. We do an in-person gathering for our company once a year, but my gosh, like if somebody started a month after that gathering, then it might be a full year before they physically meet literally anyone who works at the company. And so how are we doing virtually at creating that? What's the biggest obstacle that they face on a regular basis? And then, giving people space to really, peacock a little bit. What are they proud of? What makes them feel really good? What do they want me, as their more senior leader to know about that I might not be aware of in their day-to-day work? I work with, some folks on some teams a little bit more deeply than I do others. So that'll be really important or interesting input for me to get from them. So, let's make a little bit of a pivot here between thinking about our whole staff and the way it exists now, and thinking about, what the kind of title of this webinar is, which is how to attract and keep the best young talent. And I think this is something that we're facing as an industry, right? We want to attract young people into the industry so that we can keep it vibrant and alive, which is not to say this emphasis, and I've seen this emphasis, shouldn't make anybody feel alienated. The people who've served this industry for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, as some of my colleagues have, should still feel really, really good about that. And of course, we want to retain those folks as well, because having that wisdom, and hopefully some of that wisdom at the top of this industry, leading companies and leading large teams, is really super important. But as with anything, we're going to age out eventually. We're going to retire. Some of us may move on to other industries or other things over time. And so we've got to have a fresh influx of new talent in order to keep this healthy. And I think, one of the things that hasn't changed is people were talking about this 10 years ago when I joined the industry, and people are still talking about it now. And so how do we think about this? And this is the reason why I also talked about DEIA-B concepts in the beginning of this, is also because part of how we do that is by maintaining a workplace that embraces diversity, part of which is age diversity. So let's jump into it. So one of the first things that we can do, and the good news is that this is good for everyone, not just the Gen Z folks that you're trying to attract to your business, is having a defined onboarding plan. And so a lot of companies that I talk to about this are like, yeah, okay, I understand where that would be helpful or why that would be helpful, but my employees have been on for at least a year now or more, and I never did an onboarding. And so one of the things that my employees are probably tired of hearing from me, but that I say all the time, is that the second best time to do something is always now. So it may be that you didn't do a defined onboarding for any of your folks. You can still do one. You do not have to have a new employee in order to have an onboarding plan. And so one of the things that you can do is think about how you lead with values and character. Do your employees know what your values are as a leader, what the company's values are, and what character traits then that those values refer to that you expect them to display? If they don't know that, something to put into an onboarding plan that you can do with any employee at any time. Do your employees know what training opportunities are available to them, whether that's peer mentoring, whether that's an online service that you subscribe to, whether you've got a budget set aside and employees need only to ask you in order to attend a class or do something? How about you? Are you willing to mentor or meet with employees who are trying to reach certain career levels or whatever at specific times? So making sure your employees are well connected to what those opportunities for growth are is important. Do you have a series of experiences that you think your employees should have in order to really get the lay of the land in the business? What I mean by this is, so for example, at our company, we have every employee talk to our company executives. So any new employee that's joining gets the opportunity to talk to each of the executives and get their point of view about what's going to move the business forward. Then for that employee, depending on who they are, what their role is, we define a certain set of other people that they should also have conversations with that improves their community connectivity. It makes sure that they understand what certain other people's roles are and how that'll impact the role that they came in on. And I advise employees to redo that set of experiences, either for themselves or to have their leader lay it out anytime that they're promoted, or especially if they move departments, because we have just changed who their kind of critical associates are, and who they should be talking to. And then, scheduling specific conversations between people to build internal community and making sure, leaders in groups that should be cooperative are regularly talking with each other, for example. And then defining how your new hire should interact with the external community you serve, even if they're not in a customer-facing role. What the customer needs or wants has to impact their job. It just has to. And so what does that look like, and what are your expectations for the output of their work and how that affects, ultimately your customer? And again, if that's not something your employees understand, taking some time to define that and taking your employees through that feels like a really worthwhile activity. Now, this might again feel like, oh my gosh, I never onboarded anyone. You've got 5 bullet points. They all sound pretty juicy or pretty big. think about which one of these five is the biggest area or the biggest sort of black hole or gap, whatever you want to call it, and just chunk that off and check it off, right? Do it first. You can do this in pieces. You do not have to do this in one fell swoop. Take your entire company through a week-long onboarding session or something like that. You can chunk this down and do it over a time frame that's going to make sense for you, but still take people through these activities and these exercises again so their work is landing and it means something. The good news is once you've got that all done, then now you have a plan for new employees that you might bring on board. And they're going to feel like you've really got something for them, and do this in a practical way so that some of the employees' peers are having conversations or showing them certain things, so that you're not the one as a leader that's responsible for executing every single piece of this. That's going to help you to really get that done and to integrate it into your organization. I mentioned this before, seems like kind of a no-brainer in some ways, but offering employees the ability to continuously learn and develop. So consider an internship program. That's actually one of the best ways to attract young talent. And think about online learning platforms. These have really evolved in the last several years. So again, it's not up to you to come up with your own content and training program, and that might feel daunting for you. But think about it. And I would also say Auto Care Association, Women in Auto Care, and other organizations like that also have, mentorship opportunities and programs that you can connect people to. Use your community here in the Aftermarket, our wonderful, amazing, incredible community, to support the development of your employees. Just think about, are there auto care events? Is there online learning, available here? Are there webinars in this series that AAPEX has been so amazing to put on, that it would just help your employee to watch the replay? Right? This doesn't have to be something large and super shiny. This is a series of small actions, small experiences, and opportunities that come together for the development of employees, and then give them an opportunity on some regular basis to say, here's the development activities I've done, and encourage them to think broadly about what those are. Did they have a career conversation with a peer? Did they watch one of the webinars? Did they engage in a YouTube video? Did they watch a TED Talk? Did they do, right? What did they do? What did they get from it? And how is that landing? And you either made time, cleared the path, made a suggestion, whatever, right? Ultimately, it is also up to the employees to engage in the opportunities that you have for them, so that they're regularly thinking about that. It's up to you to create the time space, and in some cases the funding for some of these opportunities, and setting aside budget for things that cost money. Or you might even think about, if an employee is going to obtain certifications and things like that, how you can create a program that rewards them for doing that. So our company has a reward around ASE certifications, for example, that when an employee who didn't formerly have any ASE certifications achieves their first one, then we give that employee a spot bonus right then and there for that accomplishment. And we also fund employees doing that activity in the first place as well. We pay for it, and then we give a bonus for it. So let's encourage the things that and ways in which we want our employees to grow. Mission, vision, values. RepairPal has them. We've had the same values for the entire time. Our mission, or our mission is the same as well. Our vision might sometimes change depending on, again, changes in the industry, changes in the environment. So some things for you to consider. Do you have values? Do you have a clear mission? Do your employees align to your vision? Do you have a communication plan? Are you regularly talking about it? Repetition is the key here. When we were in person, we used to have this thing where the CEO would sometimes stop by people's desks and say to them, hey, can you recite the values? I'm sure that was a little bit stressful, but the point of that was, are people connected to them? Do they understand what they are? We have a performance review cycle every year. And part of what we do is we have a rating system 1 through 5, and each of these values has character examples of what a 1 through 5 rating is across each one of these values. And every employee in the company, from executives to frontline employees to engineers to marketing, everybody goes through an evaluation process against the values. So that's one way that we try to make them come to life, show that we're serious, etc. Another way is, as we're working on projects, we may decide to go a particular direction based on our values as a guide or an anchor, right? So we might say, yeah, we could do that and it might work and it might make money, but would that be authentic of us? Would we be acting as a force for good if we do that? And so forth. So we use those values to anchor what we're really trying to accomplish. And studies show, and again, this is industry agnostic, studies show that employees really connect more and are more likely to stay and are more likely to be high producing at a company that has a mission, vision, and values that they can buy into and that makes sense and that are present in their day-to-day work versus ones that don't. So I would encourage you to think beyond the what it is that you do, whether that's selling parts or running a shop or manufacturing or whatever, and to think about why you're doing that and what values you want to display in that process. If you want young talent, you gotta have an online presence and you gotta have social media and marketing that resonates. The good news is that social media and marketing could be aimed at your end customer, but it's going to attract your employee. And I would say to you, if you don't have any, you're not doing anything around this today and you're thinking, how do I get this done or how do I appeal to a young audience? Who better to appeal to a young audience than someone who is part of a young audience? Someone who is part of your target market will really be able to help you here. And look, if you're bringing someone new into your business, don't forget about the onboarding. If they don't understand about the guardrails for voice, style, etc., your values, then you might have a little bit of a challenge. And I clearly needed a guardrail here because I spelled guardrails wrong. but you want to make sure that you have set up something in which someone can operate and be successful, because it's very, very hard to keep total control over social media and marketing, right? There's a lot of activity that happens and not all of that activity can be monitored or managed. So, pick a few platforms, pick someone from your target market, and make sure that they're at least part of the team, if not helping to lead your efforts in this regard. If you're looking to attract employees, some studies recently have shown that more young folks are on LinkedIn than you might imagine. The whippersnappers are there. And so it's actually an effective place for you to create a brand presence that is actually going to span several different age groups from a business perspective. Obviously, if you're doing other kinds of recruiting or other kinds of things, you're going to want to be on social platforms where young people proliferate as well. And that includes, of course, Instagram and TikTok more than some of the others. When you're thinking about, how to refine your content, you can use AI to help you. The more specific the prompts you give to AI, the more specific the results you will get back. If you're just not that great of a writer, you can take things that you've written and run it through AI to help clean up your, grammar, spelling, punctuation, all of that. And then you can use one piece of content multiple ways. So I think about when I was a kid and mom used to buy this giant package of hamburger meat, and then we would just have hamburger meat centric meals for days, right? We would have meatloaf one night, goulash another night, hamburger mac and cheese, which is the best mac and cheese, another night, tacos another night, right? So it's like that. Think about having some core ideas that you want to share that are your hamburger meat, and then think about different ways, creating it in a Q&A style on some of your social media channels, or create it in condensed bulleted version and posting that on a blog or sending it out via email. Recording something simple and doing it as a demo or educational piece on TikTok. If you've got a nice photo of the work being performed, you can post the concept on Instagram. And you can take a snippet even from a webinar that you've done like this or something like that. You can also post that on TikTok or make it a video clip for your website. There's ways to take the same piece of content and use it multiple ways and to stretch it and actually get the absolute most from it. I would also say something, we often worry about being unique and we think, oh golly, like I already said this last week, I can't say it again. The nature of social media is such that people are not going to see the same repetitive thing from you over and over because they're not looking at or engaging in every post. You see every post because you're at your business, but the algorithms are such that not and login patterns and all of that changing over time, and so people are not going to see that post from you. You're going to have to be repetitive, and you can change it up slightly, different photo with it this time, or longer this time, shorter this time, this kind of thing. But you really can lean into being repetitive on social media platforms and being very successful with a repetitive approach, which is great because then it requires less effort. Right? And so that's awesome. And it is a way of putting yourself out there that's going to help to ensure that younger people are aware of your company and are aware of who you are and some of the things that you're doing. And that's really going to help you in terms of attracting that talent and ultimately retaining that talent. Companies that are out there and are doing fun things are fun. They're exciting to work for. They've got a presence in the world. That way when somebody's going home for family dinner or whatever, and they say they work for XYZ company, maybe somebody's heard of that company because they've got a social presence, and they'll be better able to show you off to their friends, their family, etc., which also in turn helps you to gain customers and new talent at the same time. And so, we talked about how young talent means having an online presence. But let's also think about how that online presence is reflective of your culture and your leadership level. So it's helpful in some ways to think of different generations in the workplace as different cultures. And I kind of touched on this a little bit before. See, again, repetition, we're okay with it here, right? Cultures have different outlooks, traditions, perspectives, and worldviews. And we think of this often as, people who come from different countries or different areas of the world. But we can also think of this as generations, again, because of the experiences that they've had are different than the experiences of the generation before them. And those differences in experience absolutely impact workplace culture. So let's think of, one of the most fun movies ever, Airplane, and think about views at different levels, right? So when we're up in the plane and the plane is at its highest point, and we're at the 10,000 foot view, we've got to lead at the level of mission, values, vision, marketplace fit. We have the broadest view from up there. We're seeing everything and taking in everything. And we want to definitely communicate that, but it's very hard for our employees to take our mission and distill it down into their role. So that's the reason why we've got to lead at different levels. And I like to say, because I am on an airplane a lot, I travel a ton, that when we're at that 10,000 foot view, ain't nothing wrong. Not a darn thing is wrong from up there. It's almost always just beautiful, right? And like I said, we have the broadest view, and we can lay out the most beautiful vision for our future and our employees' future from up there. And then as the plane is either just taking off or thinking about landing, we get to the 5,000 foot view. And we really need to connect those employees to that mission, values, vision, marketplace fit. We're starting to see some of the activity that's happening on the ground now. We're seeing where traffic is moving and where it's not, where the houses are, which ones of them have swimming pools, all of that kind of stuff, right? So thinking about when we're on an airplane here, we're starting to see the groups of employees, how they are in their roles. What their needs are as groups, what their cultures are, and we're also looking at our customers from some of these same lenses. And then we get to the 1,000 foot view, and we're really concerned there about results, because of course, none of this people stuff matters if there's not results. The good news is that if we take care of the people stuff and we spend most of our time working on the people stuff, the metrics, the profits, the outputs, as long as we've been clear about those and they're connecting to our mission, values, vision, and market, then they just kind of happen. I'm a chief revenue officer. I don't start with the dollars. I start with the folks. And then what happens when we start with the people, and that includes people inside my company, and it also includes partnership people that I'm making relationships with. It includes how I connect in the industry. It includes doing things like this, quite frankly. What falls out of the bottom is the money. I don't have to spend as much time worrying about that, because we've created the conditions for success by being attentive to all these other things. And then ultimately, when the plane lands and we're, on the runway in the middle of the field, that's where we're in the weeds. And that's where we need to be attentive to the individual needs, feelings, thoughts, ideas. And that includes yours, by the way. Don't forget the you in all of this. You are a part of this. So when you're at the 10,000 foot view, you might feel like you're above it. But when you're working one-on-one with people, or even in the 1,000 or 5,000 foot view, you are especially in those moments, a part of everything that's happening. And part of good leadership is also taking care of you. So we started out by saying maybe you're a little tired. If you are, think about what energizes you and what's going to make you feel really excited to do these things for your employees. Because once you're in it, and you feel good about it, it's going to make this come together so much more easily than if you're doing this because you feel you have to or you're supposed to. And this ultimately is your legacy. We spend a lot of time at work. So what we do here is part of the life that we've led. And so when we think about what we want to leave here as on this earth in our limited time that we have, part of that is how we've showed up at our work, a big part of it. If you work as many hours as I know many of you do, you are creating your legacy with every single thing you do all day long. So here's a little cheat code. How can you think about flexibility? And this is a cheat code across, these individual needs, cultures, etc. What we all feel, having all been through this experience of working from home for a time and things like that, is that we've understood how important the other parts of our lives are too, not just the work part. And there are very few employee surveys that don't end up with this result across many, many different dimensions of diversity, including generations. Many employees are looking for remote work. Can you offer this for some, any, or all of the roles in your business? How can you bring in an increased flexibility for hours or working arrangements? How does your work for the life that your employees are having? Thinking about when I talk to auto repair audiences about this, for example, they're like, well, cars are coming in during the day. I need somebody to be there to receive them. So sure, of course. But for the people working on the cars, do they have to be working on them from 8 to 5? What if they have kid drop off in the morning? Could they be working on them from 10 to 7? Could some of them even be working on them second shift or overnight? Is there an area of the business that allows for people to, to bring in or have their kids there? How can we work around the lives that each person has, as long as, the productivity is there or the work is getting done? So thinking about this and thinking about it role by role and person by person, what they might need or want, having these conversations and doing your best to make it happen. You're not going to be able to accommodate every request every time. But how can you be flexible and then therefore create a working environment that an employee never wants to leave? And then last, but certainly not least, have fun. This is an image of my own team at one point when we were an in-person company, and we were all in the San Francisco Bay Area. This is a little easier to do in person than it is remotely, but we used to do an Easter egg hunt every year. I would go to a local park. I would hurriedly hide eggs. These eggs are the take apart eggs that had like little prizes and things inside, or little sayings inside. Some of them just had sayings, some of them had prizes, and so on. And so people were, running around to collect those. We would all meet back at the office and open them. And again, it was, this is actually a video, but I just included a still image of it because look at those faces. That's not something you fake. And if we're not having fun at work, given how much time we spend there, as we just chatted about, I don't know what the point is for us, or for our employees. And so, how can we think about making that part of how we do business, or even why we do business? And again, thinking of the generational thing, everybody loves to have fun, and we love to access that childlike part of us. Childhood was when play was serious. So now we're serious, but we can seriously have fun together. And I think that work and fun don't have to be mutually exclusive, and they're best when they're paired together. So with that, I think we have about 10 minutes for questions. I would also, before we hop into those, I would encourage anybody who would like to connect with me. I'm on Linktree as Kathleen Long, and that's got my calendar and a whole host of other ways of connecting with me, whether it's on the socials or via email or whatever. I'd be happy to chat with anybody about this a little more, or see you at AAPEX. I'll be posting an AAPEX calendar to my Linktree in another couple months, so people can book time with me there in person as well. But for now, I will pause sharing and see whether we have any questions.
Thanks, Kathleen. That was such a great presentation, and it kind of just reminds you of, everything we've all gone through the past couple of years, and to still have fun with work, to still do things to improve not only your current staff but your new hires, and it was just so informational. So thank you. And we received a lot of hearts and thumbs ups, emojis during that presentation. So that was great. And another heart again right now. At this time, if anybody would like to send any questions that you may have, you can use the chat function that we uh, proactively used earlier during technical difficulties. That would be great. We'll give it a couple minutes. Lots of hearts.
I will receive those. I love hearts.
They've been going on through this entire presentation, which is awesome. Actually, the first time I've seen that with any of our webinars.
Really? Oh, well,
Yeah,
I love that. I love that for me.
and clapping hands too.
Nice. Well, I think we
So
all love our employees. I think that's what we're saying too, right? So,
absolutely, and you and I discussed earlier, but this is so relevant in the automotive industry, but also all other aspects in other industries and in life too. So it's just a really great uh, conversation with it all. No questions, but this was very inspiring for an HR manager. Thank you.
oh, good. I'm happy to hear that. I love talking about this topic. There's so many things. We could probably do a whole day on it. So many ideas out there and ways to connect. Um, and there are organizations out there now too to help us to think about how to implement different things or institute different things. I belong to a couple of those regularly, listening, specifically DOT, which is run by Tammy Tecklenburg, addresses diversity in the aftermarket, for example. But a lot of the ideas that are healthy for diversity, obviously, are healthy across a number of these different dimensions. So I encourage people, if they're interested in thinking what's my next step? What's my next step? Hearing from a diverse set of perspectives. Join an organization like that. So that's another way, especially for HR professionals, to get regular, more information, more inspiration, more feelings about heart emojis. um,
Yeah, absolutely. And like Kathleen with her last slide, definitely reach out, go to her link tree. We don't have any questions at this moment, but she has all of her contact information there should you want to further this discussion. Kathleen, sorry for the technical difficulties at first, but what an absolutely wonderful presentation. As a reminder to everyone, this will be available online at apexshow.com later this week. And on behalf of AAPEX, Kathleen, thank you so much for such an inspiring presentation. We love working with you.
Thank you. I love working with you too, Kelly. You're the best.
All right, I hope everybody has a great day, and we'll see you at the next webinar.
Sounds good. Thank you.